Hey friends. Had another wonderful day in the city. Had a really nice time playing some piano today. I did a session really kind of focusing. It's funny to me how much I have played this show without really working on the piano part. Mostly because it's a pretty playable part, but I had a really great couple sessions with the composer today, and we just got I got very inspired by what I gleaned from it, and for what that kind of, not just what it means for the performance on this album, but it had this interesting ripple effect that I think I'm going to feel in my other playing as well. So all good, great day. Something that showed up this morning, and it comes out of a bit of a conversation I had with a friend, and a bit of my own experience over the past few days as well. There's, we talk so frequently. I talk frequently, but I think in the world where we're doing inner work and we're developing our own spiritual practice, creative spirituality, as I call it, as I kind of have dubbed my path. We talk a lot about an openness to possibilities, and a kind of keeping our heart open, vulnerability, availability, engagement, full, wholehearted engagement. And what was showing up today was not in any way a refutation of that, but there was an element that just kind of came online for me, which again, I've probably even talked about it on this post before, but there's another aspect of this work which really involves defending our own spiritual integrity. There's a level on which there's a point at which, or there are circumstances in which the advice to remain open is actually not the right advice. And that's not to say that cosmically we're closing down. It's just to say that there are moments when we actually kind of have to go to bat for this process itself, for our own ownership, stewardship of our spiritual essence. And what that can sometimes look like is going into battle in a way. There can be a real defense that needs to be again. It's usually I'm saying it in these terms almost kind of deliberately, to somewhat provocatively, not because I think I'm trying to emphasize the sort of violence of it, but just because it's not a passive thing, and it's not something we can do if we are avoiding confrontation. Confrontation is a part of it, and that confrontation, we don't want to make the mistake of being in a situation that requires us to confront something either in ourselves or in someone else. Oftentimes a combination of those things, and give ourselves the advice, just remain open, just see what happens, just be available, because that availability in that context is not really is not really, in some ways it's not genuine. In some ways what we're being called upon to do is define our own boundaries, define our sense of, and our own path, our own allegiance to our path. Because, I mean, one of the things that's so, I think, slippery about a spiritual practice that, like what I'm calling creative spirituality, which I essentially kind of define as approaching life as a creative endeavor, approaching as many components of my life as I can creatively, including a fair amount of creative work, and approaching that as a spiritual path. That's something that I draw on lots of different traditions. I have had many teachers. I may have more. I have people who have never met me who I would consider deeply influential people in my life just because of, you know, the videos I've seen or the books I've read or whatever. But it's a path that we define for ourselves. No one is, it's not like we have scripture to follow. And there are difficulties with that. And I become more and more aware of them. And I think sometimes when I meet people from a particular tradition who have really invested in a particular tradition, a particular path of development for themselves, and which they then subsequently, you know, eventually teach. There's an incredible amount of value in that. There's an incredible amount of value in that, because there's just a way in which these paths are good ones. They work. They take us forward. There are structures within them that really do. They've mapped the evolution of consciousness, and we can follow that map. A great master from a tradition knows how to read the map, and they've explored a lot of the territory. So when they hand you the map and say, here's the map, you want to go explore the territory, they can give you all kinds of pointers for what to look out for, and what that territory is going to look and feel like, and what parts of the map to avoid, and you know. And I don't have that. We don't have that in the same way. If we are more kind of either self-directed or whatever we want to call it. I mean, the thing is, I think that on this path there are actually any number of universal kind of archetypal features and signposts that we can follow. But we are on that path, and there come times when the openness of that path actually can be a danger. I don't think it has to be, but it can be a danger. And there's a this is, I think, why this particular lesson is coming up for me today. There are these moments when we really have to kind of defend the path, know that we are on it, and ward off influences that are kind of trying to grab at the fabric of it, that are kind of trying to tug, you know. And this is something which I think within certain traditions is it's kind of taken care of. It's kind of like very clearly outlined sometimes when you're on the path and when you're not on the path. And I think that's why a lot of us nowadays resist those traditions, because they start to feel restrictive in ways that are not helpful. but they at least take that they do take care of the job of giving you a sense of when you're on the path and when you're off it, and that's something we also have to do. We can't not do it, because otherwise we'll just end up with mud. We'll end up with a really disoriented navigation system. And so again, this is just coming up, I think, in a variety of ways in my experience right now. And I'm both kind of invoking this as something that I want to pick up and take seriously, and I'm offering it to all of you. But there really are these moments when, you know, we want to know our own integrity is at play, is on the line, and we want to defend it. We want to be able to say, here's what feels in alignment with me. Here's what I'm aligned with. And there can feel like a spearhead going through something. You know, there can be resistance there. That's a healthy resistance to push through. It's not the kind of resistance that's trying to tell us we're going the wrong way. It's the kind of resistance that says our own structure, our own composition will be strengthened by really declaring these boundaries, by pushing through this this moment where we define ourselves up against influences that might not be in alignment with us. And it's just something that I've just become aware of recently, and I'm gaining an appreciation for it. And I think there's also part of me, because this is how it tends to work in my own awareness, is I'll lean into the vulnerability and the openness and the kind of softer side of the part of the process where my challenge is to make myself soft. My challenge is to not be, driven by compulsion, by a pattern, but to actually allow myself to be soft and available, and to take my puny ego and just let it, look beyond it, look through it, look out of this pinhole into the universe and receive the enormousness of that. And then there comes a time when defining and boundarying myself is also vital. And if I don't do that part of the process, then I'll be pulled. I'll be distracted. I'll be misled, And I think what's showing up today is just an appreciation for that, and a kind of willingness. I'm invoking a willingness in myself to take that on. And it's like I imagine if Annalise were on the spiritual path, if Annalise were on a path like this, and I saw an influence dragging her off the path, wouldn't I instantly do anything? Wouldn't I draw my sword and go into battle against any army to defend that? What about me? What about in my case? What about my own journey? Will I defend my own journey? Because at the end of the day, that's ultimately, that is defending her. You know what I mean? That if I'm really rooting into a conviction and an alignment, that's how I go into battle on behalf of anybody close to me as well. That's how I establish the contours of what alignment is and take it seriously. Give myself the actual, a real recognition of what that means. And it's an ego sublimating process. It's not a process of the ego rebelling or the ego lashing out. It's a process of sublimating the ego, not allowing the ego to be drawn into something that would take me out of integrity, and then defending those boundaries. So, it's just what's showing up today. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. So much love. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.